From County College of Morris, this is CCM All Access.
Hello, and welcome to CCM All Access, the program that brings you news and information from the County College of Morris. Students on campus, members of the community, people doing good things. I'm Nicholas Kratzel, and joining me today is Professor Maureen Kazaba, who teaches in the Criminal Justice Program here at CCM. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. So what do you do here at CCM? I know you work in the Criminal Justice Department, but are you a professor? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm assistant professor in Criminal Justice Department. There's
Okay.
3 of us who are here full-time, and so we all teach a variety of courses within that curriculum.
Awesome. So I guess we can go into that. What kind of courses are you teaching?
Okay, the criminal justice system is our very basic course, the one that we ask students to start with. There's also an intro to public safety careers. We companion those together in the student's first semester. And the intro is going to teach students some of the very basics, using Blackboard, using the systems that we use here, and
Sure.
also how to research the careers that are possible for them with the degree that they're taking.
Awesome. So are you teaching one of those or both of those?
It depends from semester to
Oh,
semester,
okay.
but I do teach them both at
Awesome.
some time.
That's great. I know. I remember you obviously know this. I took that class last year. That class is amazing. It's you
Thank
learn
you.
so much about things that you really wouldn't find anywhere else. And obviously you have a background in the criminal justice system. Can you go into
Yes.
that a little bit?
Sure. I started out as a police officer in Chester Borough, and I was there for just about 2 years, and then I moved to Chatham Township where I completed my career.
Oh, okay. Awesome. So was that before you became a professor?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So would you like to go into that?
Sure.
Okay.
So when I started out, I was a patrolman, moved over to Chatham, and throughout time changed my positions and had promotions and things like that. So I was a patrol officer as well as a detective, detective sergeant, detective lieutenant, and then retired as an administrative lieutenant. During that time, I still did some teaching. I did teaching at the police academy. First, when I graduated, I was teaching PT, and later on, methods of instruction, which was teaching police officers how to teach, so they could go back to their departments and teach some courses that were necessary.
Right.
Then I came here after I retired, about 3 years after I retired.
Okay. Oh, so did you get, so obviously you have an education
Yes.
in criminal justice.
Right.
Did you do that before or after you were working for the
Both.
police department? Oh, really?
So,
Okay.
so I started out here at CCM.
Okay.
And I
that was after you were a police officer?
No.
Oh, no.
Before, right out of high school.
Oh,
17 years old.
really?
I started
Okay.
the program. At the time, it was called law enforcement
Okay.
instead of criminal justice, and that was a 2-year program. And after that, I went to William Patterson and completed my bachelor's. And at that time, I got a degree, got the job in Chester Borough after getting the
Okay.
bachelor's.
Wow. So you were here, and then you went into the police force, and then you came back, technically.
Well, yes. Full circle.
Wow,
Full
okay.
circle, yes.
Interesting. So did you end up getting your associates or no?
I did. I got my
Oh, okay.
associates here and the bachelor's at William Patterson.
Patterson.
And then I really am close to this college. When I was doing my PhD, I used CCM. This is where I did my research with criminal justice students
Sure.
on a stress reduction program. I have 6 kids, and all of them have come here. So now I'm back here teaching.
Oh,
So
that's
it really
great.
is full circle.
Awesome. So you said you went to CCM and then William Patterson.
Right.
So when did you decide that you wanted to further your education even more? Because you did say that you were going for your doctorate.
Right. It wasn't too many years in, but then I went to Seton Hall and that was a master's in education.
Okay.
And then Fairleigh Dickinson, and that was a master's in counseling. And that was with the intention of having therapy practice afterwards.
Oh, okay.
That's what I was thinking would be of interest to me. So I moved ahead and got my license as an LPC, and then got my PhD in psychology.
Oh, really? Okay. So why did you choose psychology?
It ties into everything.
It does.
There
Yes.
is not a profession that you can be in that psychology isn't going to have a benefit.
Sure.
It tied in nicely to education as well as criminal justice.
Yes.
And counseling, of course.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. I know. Like last year, I took psychology as a course, and you learn like literally everything: business, businesses hire psychologists. It's amazing. It's such an amazing, career to go into.
Yeah.
So how have you applied that to being a teacher?
Okay. So all of them you can see have a purpose in this
Sure.
position. The criminal justice is obvious, the education, obvious. The psychology and counseling, they can help me with many things. For one, as far as coursework, in particular criminology, because criminology blends sociology, psychology,
Yeah.
the criminal justice system. So it's got so many different aspects to it. And I find that really has given me an opportunity to understand that course much better than I would have without that kind of background.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah,
okay.
because we talk about the people's relations to one another, what make people make the decisions that they do, what are the choices between a law-abiding future or a future with criminal activity involved.
Right.
So yeah, that's
So
very
I guess,
interesting to me.
Yeah, sure. So it's, I guess, like you're kind of saying like the mind of what the individual is thinking about, Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
So with criminal justice, right? You're, like you said, you kind of are implementing studies that you had with your doctorate into criminal justice system. Would you advise people to do the same thing after going into criminal justice? I mean, like going, further in their education, maybe into psychology or sociology, anything.
I would definitely say to continue your education. I believe in education for education's sake. You don't have to have a particular goal.
Sure.
It makes you more interesting person. I think there's so many more things that you learn. Your conversations, even with your students, you're a great example of that. You're not a criminal justice major, but you were, and you took the criminal justice courses.
Yes.
Now you find other things that are of interest, and every time you take a course, you might find what it is you're actually going to do for a living.
Absolutely.
And even what you're doing here.
Oh, absolutely, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting, some people going into college, I think there's such a focus in high school, even middle school, when you're a kid even, so far back that, people are saying to themselves, kids, I want to make this amount of money and I want to do this to make that amount of money. And then they go to school. That's part of the reason why I think community college is so great, because they can go in, people can learn about different things, and it's not such a financial burden, which is obviously the greatest part about it. But, it's not sometimes about how much money you're making, rather, that you like it, right? Would you agree with that? Or?
I agree. I think all of my kids having gone here, it does save money, but there's also a lot more conveniences. When students are going right from high school to college, a lot of them don't transition very well into a 4-year college, being away from home. And this is a much easier transition, and then they can move on to a 4-year college afterwards.
Sure.
So you have that comfort level. Here at CCM, there's a lot of connection. We have small classes. Some classes my students were, my kids were in Rutgers. There are 200 students in a Rutgers class.
It's insane.
Yeah. So we have, the maximum for the courses I teach is 28. And so you really get to connect with your students. You know them. And when you ask about the different degrees, I think that the psychology pays off there too. You have a better understanding of the students that you're working with.
Right.
And we do advising for all of our students in criminal justice. What is it they want to do? They may, vast majority say they want to be police officers, but when it comes down to it, will they really want to follow through with that career, or is there something in the field that is interesting to them that doesn't require 24-hour shifts and carrying a weapon?
Yes.
Doing things that we think of as a uniform officer doing.
I guess the dirty work, you could say.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
You could say that.
So I get like kind of what you were saying, I guess. Someone told me this once, but I guess not about sometimes what you're teaching, but like you said, it's, you got to understand who you're teaching too. I guess that's kind of hard. But so I'd like to move over to something else really quick.
Sure.
So I understand that you guys have a Capstone project in criminal justice department. Can you explain what that is?
So we have the death scenes, and there's one that's a virtual reality course, and then, or not the course, a component of the course. So we have a project in virtual reality, and we now, as of about a year ago, have been given a room that is our lab, a criminal justice lab. So in there we have really high quality mannequin that we're really excited we just received, and we have in that room we have furniture, making it more of a realistic place. Prior to that, we would just move all the desks out of a regular classroom and throw down a mannequin and hope for the best. So here we are increasing the quality and the amount of equipment and props that we have. So between the two of them, they're actually the same type of investigation. We used death for both of them, but there's differences. So I thought that when we went from the mannequin, that students would love the VR and we might do away with the mannequin scene. But it wasn't that case at all. There's pros and cons to both of them, and the students could see that and help me to see their perspective. So with the virtual reality, you can go in, we filmed that. Professor Olson used his home for that. So it's very realistic. You see a home that's filled with a lot of things that can be meaningless or can be evidence, can be important to the investigation or not. And you'll have to learn to discern. You can't take everything, right? So you might see a cord. Is that a weapon or is it simply a cord?
Cord, yes.
So that gives the students more to think about in that regard, trying to hone in on what's really important.
Right.
But they can't, at this time, we're looking for more advanced programming, but at this time they can't go in and manipulate any of the items in the scene.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
So
I know some of those virtual realities, they do have that, right?
Right. At the time, and they still are quite expensive, so we started where we could, and we're looking to advance the programming so that we can add that to it.
Right. So I know you said there was kind of many objectives, like you said, like with the cord. Is it just a cord or is it a weapon? So what's the overall, I guess, objective of the project? Like what are students aiming to achieve?
They're trying to think things through. So what we try to have them do is go in and be slow and be methodical.
Yes.
Right? You don't want to go in, and you can imagine, especially a new officer, and any officer can get that scene. You could be a week out of the academy. You won't do the thorough investigation by yourself, but you could be the first one at the scene.
Sure.
So you'll have to know those basic steps of securing the scene, who to notify, and who you can or can't let into the scene as things progress. So then we're really moving them to more of a mindset of a detective as they go further. So what their objective is that you are going to try to determine what happened at that scene to the best of your ability. And then there's other components of it. So for instance, I'm just getting these projects now, so I'm reading through them.
Of course, yeah.
These students will be asked, once you complete that on-scene investigation, what will you do next? Give me 5 steps of things you'll do.
Wow,
So they'll think of the logical things. Are there cameras? I'll go and get that footage. I'll look through there. I'll talk to neighbors, talk to family. If you see things like a prescription bottle there, follow up with the physician, see why they were given.
So many things to take into account.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, interesting.
And so you take those steps. Ultimately, we ask them to come up with the manner and cause of death. So they have 4 choices for the manner of death. They have to, first, we get them to commit to one, and they can do that with a partner. So what do you think happened here? And is it a homicide, suicide, accidental, or natural causes? So they make that determination and then say what the cause is. So if it was a homicide, blunt force trauma might be the answer. Now they have to do it 2 more times and not repeat the manner or the cause. So they've really committed to what it could be, and this is just an exercise in being more open-minded. Now it can't be that. What else could it be?
Right.
And so to have them think in a different way.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Awesome. Now we're going to take a break. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Choosing a college is a big deal. But I know I started right because CCM is in the top 2% of community colleges in the nation.
And at County College of Morris, I get to choose from over 100 programs. Whether you're just out of high school,
Like me.
exploring career options,
Like me.
or seeking lifelong learning,
Like me.
make CCM your choice.
Like me. Go big and visit ccm.edu and aspire to be you.
Welcome back to CCM All Access. I'm Nicholas Kratzel, and we're here with Professor Maureen Kazaba. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I understand that you used to teach at the police academy, and we were just talking about the virtual reality. Can you explain some of the facilities that are in the police academy, and some of the exercises some of the people in the police academy are doing?
Yes. So one of the things is this. We have here a simulator at CCM, and they also have one at the academy. A vast difference in the expense and the quality, but that's something to help officers to do some training without using live ammunition, and we could have feedback. It makes it more realistic. So what they'll do is they have the screens in front of you at the academy. There's I believe it's 3 different screens, so there's more of a feeling of realism there. And there's actors that are filmed. And so it could be somebody coming towards you just to ask you a question. It could be a motor vehicle stop. You could be getting called to a domestic, or called to something you don't know what the nature of the call is.
Sure.
And then the endings can change. So when you prepare and you expect this looks like just a nice lady going to ask you a question, but it turns out she just left the house and there was a homicide inside, things can change very quickly. And this gives officers that chance to learn to react and to observe the surroundings and different steps like that for more realistic training.
Sure.
So what we've done at CCM back in that lab room is we have a simulator ourselves. So this is something you had experience
I took part
with.
in this. Very
right?
cool.
Yeah. So the guns are weighted properly and formed like a Glock.
Yep.
And so you get that feeling, and you can change the clips and watch the scenarios. Sometimes you're dealing with a person who's mentally ill. That can be very challenging. Sometimes we have so many. There's hundreds of different scenarios that are in the software. But you'll see people pop up. Some of them will have a weapon, but they are a police officer. Some people aren't armed, and they are innocent civilians, and everything in between. There could be children who quickly come into the picture. So again, it
you have to avoid them. I remember. Yes,
shoot them.
Not a good idea.
So that's something that it's a little more fun. We can bring that in, especially at the end of the semester when you've gotten all the stuff out of the way, and now you get to do things.
Stuff.
Yeah. And the more fun stuff you can do and incorporate in your class, even throughout the semester.
Awesome.
It's a great way to do things.
So how did you? I guess I don't know if it was you or anyone else in your department. How did that get implemented?
So what we had, I had gone to the academy with one of my classes. I have an intro to policing class, so I had taken them up there, and an instructor there had taken them through some scenarios. Then I spoke with my chair, and he had already been familiar with this kind of thing. At that point, he applied for a grant, and so that's how we ended up getting that equipment here.
Wow. Okay, that's so cool. So did you want to go back into that? Bringing your class to the academy?
Yes.
I totally forgot that was a thing, but I remember in your class last year we kind of talked about that. It sounded so interesting.
Yes.
But
So that's our intro to policing class, and what we do, the goal of that class, in a couple of words, is to prepare for the academy, to get the job. And so we teach students how to write a resume and a cover letter, how to do interviewing. I've had police chief come in and do mock interviews with the students. We do go and visit the academy. We watch the PT, the physical training, and when there's the opportunity, we'll do the firearm simulator. Even if they do it here, it's going to be a very different experience there.
Right.
The physical training is something that's part of that class as well. So we start out in the gym every day. We do some general training. There are weights up there, but then we also simulate how the class will be. So you have calisthenics.
You guys go through the whole thing?
Yes, we do.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
And they're out there running. You can come see at 8 o'clock in the morning.
I don't know if I want to take part in it, but okay. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And so no matter what the weather, as long as it's not icy, they're out there doing the running and building up, because we want them to be successful. Physical training is one of the reasons people most frequently fail out of the police academy.
Yes.
And it's something that you know in advance exactly what you need to do.
Yeah.
So just be prepared, and it's going to be a real advantage.
Yeah. I do remember when I was younger, my uncle brought me, there was like a police camp in his town, like for like little kids. And we visited, in the same day, we visited the county jail and then the police academy. And this isn't about the jail, but I remember the police academy going into it. Obviously, I had no intent of becoming a police officer, but I remember seeing these guys, and they had these gray outfits on, and the gray outfits were pretty much like black because they were sweating so hard. Like, it's just unbelievable, like how much work these people put in, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Yeah, it's an important part, and having students learn that when they first come here. So they don't have to take that course. That's an elective. But if you're not in shape, I always ask my students right at the beginning of our classes, how many of you have a workout program?
Yep.
Don't need to take the class, but if you want to be a police officer, start now.
Yep.
No, it takes some time to build up to where you need to be. And some very basic things like push-ups, sit-ups, and running
Yes.
are things that you could do on your own, no expense, and you could begin at any time.
Absolutely. So I guess with the police academy again, how have you seen it change? Because obviously you were there, but from the time you were there to now is probably a lot different. Is there a bit of a change, or?
Even the building has changed.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
right,
sure.
very, very basic changes. The amount of people who are in there now that's fluctuating a lot. We've had some changes in attitudes towards police, and so we find that some departments are having more difficulty recruiting, which
Okay.
for students who are interested in this field, that's a great opportunity.
Sure, it's
because
perfect, yeah.
it certainly will turn around. We've had what we used to do at the time I was teaching PT, that was just people who would come from on their time off, officers who would come and do that. And now a lot of them are sent there by their departments. And that's just a small component. And that's changed. It used to be first thing in the morning. Because of COVID and shower situations, they made it later in the afternoon. So I think that will go back to being a morning topic for them to do. And that's something to remember, that if you're here and you can do the running and sit-ups and so forth, that's wonderful. But now are you going to sit in that academy class?
Yes.
And that's got a whole different kind of
different.
pressure.
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Well, I guess not completely different, but I guess the attitude towards what you're doing and the end goal of it is probably a lot more difficult.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and the attitude, I think, is a good one to bring
Sure.
up. Just
Yep.
as you remember in my class, we have the names that you put
Yes.
out. You don't wear
Yes.
your caps. These are things
Yes.
to simulate more of how it will be.
Yes.
Not so much in a college class, but more how it will be in the academy.
Yeah.
So you're going to be quiet throughout your class. You're going to be attentive and disciplined, and be responding to the instructors.
Right.
Be prepared for class.
Sure,
You know,
absolutely.
so there is more discipline to that, which
Yeah.
is important.
So do you see a lot of your students that I guess come into, I want to say not the people that take the class as an elective, I'm saying the actual people that are majoring in criminal justice. What do you see them go into most? Are they becoming police officers, or are they furthering to go back and do that, or are they furthering their education and doing something else?
It's a combination, but I'd say more are moving on to the 4-year.
Okay.
And I just had a student right a few months ago. He's graduated the State Police Academy, so he's very excited about that. The Sheriff's Department students
Sure.
have moved on to that agency. So they do continue to look around, but I think the moving on to their 4-year degree is important to many of them.
Sure.
There are some that, as we were saying earlier, they decide that being a police officer is not the right thing for them, but looking at different types of agencies so that may
Yes.
have more of a social component to it. There are some that just don't want to work with the restrictions that you have as a police officer.
Yeah, I mean, I know we did, it might have been your class, but I remember we had watched a video about people that, officers that work in the city that ended up not being patrol officers, but they had more of, say, like a desk job, where they didn't go out so much, and they were kind of working with people on parole and people that weren't necessarily incarcerated. Not so much social workers, but in that field, and how people can go into that.
Right.
Yeah.
You have a lot of options to go different things besides in a police agency directly. But I also, I have some troopers come in and speak to my classes. One of them in particular always tells my students, whatever your interests are, to keep them up, because you can make that part of your job. So the state police is a good example,
Sure.
more than 100 different positions. So if you enjoy computers, riding a motorcycle, boating, flying, there's a number of things that you can do, and then that can be your job.
Right.
And something that if it's your interest, even in your private time, it's a great way to have a job, right? Then it doesn't feel like work anymore.
Right.
So whatever your specialties are, people who like terrorism. They want to study that. You can be in an agency, a larger agency, New York Police, NYPD, or State Police again, and make that part of your job, or get those kind of specific assignments. So you do have a lot of flexibility, not just being on patrol.
Right. So I remember, I just want to touch on this for a second. I know you can kind of see this when you go over and get a pamphlet of what classes you have to take for criminal justice. There's so many tracks that you could take. Do you have a personal favorite or anything like that?
So we are no longer doing tracks.
Really?
Right.
Wow.
But it's good because we still leave those. What we found was sometimes students would get confused because we had these tracks, and within the track for investigative functions, for instance. Then we'd have the investigative class. You could add psychology, things like that. But then you stayed within that track. So if someone was going outside of our electives, they take something else, juveniles, then having psychology with that would be interesting. But there's also the concept of just sampling around. So what we were saying for courses in general, but in particular here, criminal justice courses, but you don't have to know what you want. Maybe you'll take an investigations class and see that's exactly what you want to do.
Yes.
You might take something about juvenile justice and think that's nothing like what you want to do.
Right.
So the sampling is as much of an advantage to know what you don't want as to know what you want.
Right, absolutely.
And that would be the same with internships.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, sure.
Right?
I mean, I guess you go into them paid or not paid. You're obviously going into it because you have some type of interest in the subject, and you end up learning a lot because you're working with people that obviously work in the field. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's definitely a very interesting concept.
And then you have the realism too. You see what they do. They're not out on calls all the time. Every day isn't exciting. There can be some mundane things or something that's very routine. Will you be able to work with that, or would that be something that doesn't suit you as far as a career? So what you learn in one direction or another is really important in the internship.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I
My
love the
pleasure.
conversation we had. It was great.
It was good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. You too.
Thank you.
This has been another edition of CCM All Access. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.